Hey guys, I am going to continue reading May Magic, and in the first couple chapters, Bradley wanted a ducks so that way he can get the feathers to make pillows and make money. But Mom's not too sure about that idea, so he is actually going to take her to a hypnosis to be able to hopefully convince her to get some ducks. So Mother's Day is around the corner, so that's what they decided to do, was take her to see Hypno. And we'll have to see what happens. Chapter 3. Mom is Ducky. Don't be silly, Brian's mom said to him. Why would I want to let Hypno hypnotize me? Just then Hypno walked to the edge of the stage. He shaded his eyes so he could see into the audience. Are there any other volunteers? He asked. Brian jumped to his feet. Yeah, my mom, he said. Bradley pulled his brother back into his seat. What are you doing? He whispered. You'll see, Brian said. We're over here, Mr. Hypno. Hypno walked down the stage stairs. He marched to the row where Bradley was sitting with his mother and brother. Nate and Lucy turned around in their seats and stared at Brian. Are you going to do it, Mrs. Pinto? Nate asked. Before Bradley's mother could answer, Hypno was standing next to her. He put out his hand. Hello, I'm Hypno. What is your name? Bradley's mother shook Hypno's hand. I'm Pamela Pinto, she said. But I'm not Pamela Pinto, what a lovely name, said Hypno. Why don't you join me on the stage? Your handsome twins can come too. Gee, Bradley, we're handsome, Brian said. Well, I don't know, their mother said. Do it, Mom, Brian said. It'll be fun, Lucy said. Only Bradley remained quiet. He knew that Brian had a plan. Bradley wondered if Hypno could really hypnotize his mom so she would let Brian raise ducks. Okay, come on, boys, said Mrs. Pinto. She followed Hypno back to the stage. Bradley and Brian were right behind her. The whole audience clapped and whistled. Hypno sat the twins' mother on the sofa with Bradley and Brian next to her. Pamela Pinto, do you chew your nails? He asked. Of course not, she said. She held out her hands. What lovely pink nail polish, Hypno said. Yes, my son Josh gave it to me for Mother's Day. And my husband gave me this bracelet. And what did these two young men give you for Mother's Day, he asked. He pointed his wand at Bradley and Brian. They bought the tickets to see your show, she said. Such nice sons you have, Hypno said. So, boys, what shall we do with your mother, he asked. Bradley didn't know what to say, but Brian did. My mom doesn't like ducks. Can you hypnotize her so that she loves them? Brian's mother glared at him. I never said I didn't like ducks. That's an excellent idea, Hypno said. What do you folks think? The audience cheered and clapped. Okay, Mrs. Pinto, please close your eyes, Hypno said. She closed her eyes. I feel silly, she said. Brian giggled and Bradley poked him in the ribs. Hypno passed his wand over Mrs. Pinto's head. He muttered some strange words. Mrs. Pinto, please open your eyes, Hypno said after a minute. She opened her eyes. Mrs. Pinto, do you like animals? He asked her. Of course I do, she said. We own a dog and a pony, and I had rabbits when I was a girl. Marvelous. Now tell your audience your favorite animal. Well, I have to think a moment. Bless me, excuse me. Well, I have to think a moment, Mrs. Pinto said. Take your time, Hypno said. He gave the audience a big wink. I'd have to say songbirds, Mrs. Pinto said finally. We have several bird feeders on our yard. Excellent. You are fond of our flying friends, he said. He leaned toward her. Now, Pamela, tell us how you feel about ducks. I don't like them, she said. Ducks are noisy and messy, and they would destroy my garden. The audience laughed. Bradley laughed too. Brian did not laugh. Hypno didn't laugh either. He scratched his chin. Hypno will have to try something else, he said. Mrs. Pinto, will you please come with me? He walked her over to the red booth. He swept the curtain aside. Will you step inside, please? The twins' mother stepped into the booth. Hypno closed the curtain. He turned toward the audience. I must have absolute silence, he said. The auditorium went quiet. On the sofa, Bradley listened to his own heartbeat. Hypno closed his eyes and spoke. Pamela Pinto loves the birds. Pamela Pinto hears my words. With super magical hypno luck, make Pamela Pinto love a duck. Then he yanked the gold curtain aside. Bradley's mother was gone. In her place stood a big white duck. The audience went wild. Bradley thought he would keel over. The duck waddled out of the booth. Even from the sofa, Bradley could see that the duck had pink nail polish on its toenails. Hanging around the duck's neck was his mom's new bracelet. Chapter 4, Too Much Magic. You turned our mom into a duck, Brian yelled. Bradley couldn't open his mouth. He just stared at the duck. It stood in the middle of the stage and looked at the audience, and then it sat down and began to preening its feathers. The bracelet around the duck's neck glistened under the lights. My goodness, said Hypno. I guess I used too much magic. Hypno got down on one knee next to the duck. Pamela, can you hear me? He asked. The duck said, quack. The audience was totally quiet. You could have heard a feather drop. Hypno turned to the audience. What should we do? He asked. Bradley answered, change her back. Change her back, the audience chanted. Change her back. Change her back. Very well, Hypno said, but we must have silence. You're scaring the duck. You're scaring Mrs. Pinto. The audience settled down again. Hypno shooed the duck back into the booth and closed the curtain. Then he closed his eyes and spoke. Pamela doesn't want to quack. Hypno will now change her back. With my magic and Hypno luck, she'll no longer be a duck. Hypno swept the curtain open and Mrs. Pinto stepped out. The audience broke into cheers and whistles. Mom, Bradley cried, jumped up and hugged his mother. How do you feel, Pamela? He asked. Thirsty, she said. Do you suppose I could have a glass of water? I'm feeling extremely thirsty. Hypno poured Mrs. Pinto a tall glass of water. She drank it down and held out the empty glass. Thank you, she said. May I have another? I don't know why I'm so thirsty. I just crave water. Hypno gave Mrs. Pinto a second glass of water. She gulped it down and handed him the glass. Pamela, may I ask how you feel about ducks now? Hypno asked. Do you still dislike them? What a silly question. She answered, I adore ducks. I love the way they waddle and splash in the water. Brian poked his brother. See, Bradley, Mom adores ducks. It worked. Bradley couldn't believe his eyes and ears. Hypno beamed at the audience. Thank you, Pamela Pinto. Thank you, boys, he said. The audience cheered as Bradley followed Brian and their mom off the stage. Bradley noticed a white feather stuck to the hem of her dress. Back in their seats, Bradley snuck a look at his mother. Did she really love ducks now? He wondered. Would she really let Brian raise them? Shaking his head, Bradley sat back down to watch the rest of the show. Boy, Mom's been in the bathroom a long time, Brian said the next morning. I know, Bradley said. He was sitting on his bed waiting to brush his teeth. Did you knock on the door? Brian threw himself on the bed. Yep, she's taking a bath, a long bath. I can hear her splashing around in there. Weird, Bradley said. When we splash in the tub, she yells at us. Yeah, no fair, Brian said. Plus, she always took showers before. Anyway, when she comes out, I'm going to ask her. Ask her what? Bradley asked. If I can get some ducks to raise, Brian said. He grinned at his brother. He had an evil twinkle in his eye. Now that she loves ducks so much, she's bound to let me, thanks to Hypno. Do you really think she got hypnotized last night? Bradley asked. Hypno looks like a big phony to me. Duh, he turned Mom into a duck, Brian said. Then he turned her back. What's phony about that? Bradley sat on his bed and thought about what happened at the high school that last night. Did you notice anything strange about Mom when we got back? Like what? Brian asked. Well, she didn't yell when we ate ice cream before bed, Bradley said. She never lets us eat before bedtime. Bradley stared at his twin brother. You're right, he said. And she didn't even remind us to brush our teeth. Bradley looked at the clock. It was almost 10:30. And she didn't tell us to make our beds this morning. It was almost like she doesn't care what we do. Cool, Brian said. He picked up a comic book. Bradley tiptoed to the hallway and stood outside the bathroom door. He could hear splashing and his mom singing. He put his ear against the door. Bradley tore back into his room. Brian, come here, you have to hear this. The boys huddled next to the bathroom door with their ears against the wood. They heard their mother singing. 6 little ducks that I once knew, short ones, fat ones, skinny ones too. But one little duck with the feather on his back, he ruled the others with a quack, quack, quack. And that's the end of chapter 4. We will have to see what happens as the book goes on.